My name is Elizabeth Ann West, and I'm teaching Math is Money with ScribeCount. So we'll look a little bit at ScribeCount as well. Math is the universal language, and every single one of you is a language expert. We're going to build models to challenge our beliefs about business. Absolutely no one is going to be left behind, okay? So what I want you to do, I have a couple of life preservers through the presentation to make sure everybody's still on board. We are only going to count, add, subtract, multiply, and divide. And use your phone, okay? I will try to make it interactive and fun because it's 8:15 in the morning. But if at any time you are a little bit lost, just do like the universal in this room sign for like drowning right here, and I will ask, you know, how I can make sure that I can slow it down for you. Because my goal is to make sure that everybody walks away better equipped to make data-driven decisions. And then also, my email is writer@elizabethannwest.com. Please email me anytime if you just want to talk about publishing, something to do with your business. I've been doing this since 2011, so it's my pleasure to give back to the community because so many people helped me coming up as well. Okay. So, I accidentally became a writer in 2007. They paid me $7 for my first article. And when I was coming into publishing, I was already making 65% off of my SEO articles. I was literally folding laundry and hearing Be the Monkey, Not the Frog, and how Barry Eisler had walked away from a 6-figure deal with Chad Putt. So as I was matching socks, I'm listening to Joe Conrad and Barry talk about all the skills you need to be an indie author, make a website, understand how search engines work. And I was blessed that I already had those skills. So then I went to thepassivevoice.com. How many of you remember that blog? Know that blog? Yep. And learned that contracts from New York were 25% of net. Who's signing up for 25% when you're making 65%? Not me. So I became an indie from the get-go. My only rejections were from a fan fiction site, actually, twilighted.net, back in the day, because I was switching my tenses. I wrote and published my first novel in 2011. I invested $414 in it. If you would like to see Baby Elizabeth author, eawestwriting.blogspot.com is still out there with my budget and my plans and how we all had to figure it out as we were going along. So unfortunately, I ran into an unhelpful author who made me feel like I was awful at what I was doing, even though I wasn't. I wasn't making data-driven decisions yet. So from 2012 to 2015, I was a book marketer. How many of you remember when we were giving away Kindle Fires every single day and sharing free and cheap books? Exactly. Again, I was lucky to have that job because I ran the website and everything. So I was able to see the data that when April Floyd and I would put up a free book, a 99-cent book, and a new release from Stephen King, the readers were grabbing all 3 books. So how many of you have thought that readers only buy at certain price points? The truth is, they buy at all of them. The thing that they want the most is a book that they want. That's the number one criteria for someone to buy a book. 2014 to 2019, and then 2021 to present, I've been a full-time fiction writer with a part-time work schedule, because I also homeschool, and I live in a multi-generational home. And I have made over $275,000 with my book sales with a 60% pre-tax profit margin. It's a really big mouthful. We're going to talk about profitability. I've never made 6 figures in a year. I'm a mighty mid-lister. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So, what is a 60% profit margin? What does that even mean? Well, we want to start talking about profit margins in our industry because revenue is meaningless unless we talk about expenses. How many of you have seen people share screenshots in author groups and it has some astronomical number and we're so happy for them, but do they ever talk about how much they spent to get that number? No. Yeah. And the reason we're going to do pre-tax is because everybody's tax situation is different. By country, if you have 5 kids, you're getting way more deductions than I'm getting. So what is 60% of $275,000? So of means multiply. It is a magic word when you're looking at word problems and things like that. If you see the word of, you're going to press that X button on your calculator. So that is $165,000. That's what I kept as profit. And that's what I kept over a period of 8 years. I took 12 to 18 months off repeatedly. I probably only worked about 4 of those years out of the 8 consistently. I got divorced, I moved a couple of times, my ex-husband was Navy, so I was lucky if I got 20 hours in a week for hourly work. So what is that average per year? Per is another keyword, we're not talking about Kit Kats, but it means to divide. So $165,000 divided by 8 years is $20,000 a year average. Again, that was my profit. That's what I took home. That's what I had to pay taxes on. So over those years, I averaged an hourly rate of about $19 an hour. How many of you would sign up for a part-time job that paid you $19 an hour? That you didn't have to wear pants. Pants optional.
Oh, hell yeah.
Exactly. I know they're not sexy numbers. I'm not going to come up here and tell you how to make $1 million. I wish I could, but if there was a magic way to just spend your way to profitability or to success in publishing, we wouldn't have a job because all of the big publishers would already do it. So there's no magical way to spend yourself profitable. So I'm a boring mid-lister, but I never got on the book a month training. And no judgment on it, I wish I could. I've stood on a platform, I've tried really hard. It just doesn't work with my personal life. But knowing how to write business math models, like how many of you forecast? Oh, I'm so proud, that's good, that's awesome. I meet a lot of authors who are afraid to make a forecast. And honestly, no one comes up to you and punishes you if it's wrong. We're going to learn how to calculate metrics. Metrics just measure something. That's it. We're going to talk about some like return on investment, click through, or read through, and how it keeps you all in business. Any questions? Anyone drowning? Okay, good.
Not yet.
All right, who made more money? The person who made $200,000 in revenue and the person who made $60,000 in revenue? We don't know. We don't know. Okay, now these are hypotheticals, but I think I'm pretty on par. They do represent data I have been privy to over the years. So $200,000 a year, I'm imagining that this person is spending $10,000 a month in advertising. How many times have you seen somebody spending $10,000 a month in advertising? A lot. Countless times, right? And their production cost, $2,000 a book. I'm imagining that they're doing a book every single month. That's usually pretty common. If you're a 6-figure author, and what's 12 times 2 is $24,000. So their pre-tax profit's $56K. Somebody who made $60,000, and these numbers are actually based off of very similar models to what I did twice, two different years in my career. So about $6,000 in advertising. I like to keep my advertising at about 10% of my revenue. I will say that a bunch of times in this presentation. You don't have to be exactly 10%. I'm just sharing it as a guideline. Production costs. So writing, I did the same cost per book, but this person's only writing about 6 books a year. And pre-tax profit is $42,000. This is just an example to show you that if you met these two authors at a bar, and somebody says I make $60K a year, somebody says I make $200K a year, you can't help yourself that you're naturally thinking that the $200K person has it more together. But once you start subtracting expenses, chances are good they may be very close in how much money they actually keep in their pockets at home. So, any questions? Everyone's with this? I did pretty consistent things that we're seeing in our industry with our peers. Yeah. Okay. So what's the point? We have this balance being here. Would I love to make $200,000 of revenue in my business? Absolutely. I would love it. But do I want to spend almost $150,000 to do it? And if you're wondering how I got that number, remember the 200K author in our example only kept $56,000. Means $150,000 out the window, went back to it. And that's a pre-tax profit margin of only 28%. And what that means is you're on a really skinny balance fee. If Amazon glitches on the day that you do a big release, you don't have a lot of profit margin to eat that problem. And it's happened to me countless times. I'm sure, have any of you had something go wrong when you were launching and you were really counting on things? Exactly. So the 60K author, now remember these two authors kept almost the same amount of money. The $60,000 is just not a sexy number. Nobody's going, woohoo, I made 5 figures. That's a 70% pre-tax profit margin. So that author has a lot more space in their profitability to accept something not going as planned. My book that I released in May came out the same day as the Uvalde shooting. That town is 2 towns over for my nieces and nephews. My nephew plays football against them. I worked on that book for over 2 years, but when that happened, I was like everyone else. I was mourning for a week, so I didn't want to share my book. I was, just upset. So I shared some data yesterday in my presentation, and that book made 58% of what my book made in December. But because I do my math models in such a way, I was okay. It was within my expectation with my forecast of what could happen, so it was okay. I mean, not the shooting, obviously, but what happened with my book. All right, so I just checked, and I'm fine. Okay, so my example doesn't mean that everyone making 6 figures is bad at managing their money, or everybody making 60K is really good at managing their money. Honestly, I have not found a certain amount of money means that you're really good at managing money. I've seen people who make $500,000 tell me that they have no idea what their profitability is, which is scary, but you do you. But in the decade plus that I've been an indie author, I've seen a lot of authors delude themselves about revenue, profit, and treating their credit card statement like it's capital. And I want to be really clear, your credit card is not capital, it's debt. So, publishing changes, we all adapt. Is anyone doing the same thing that they were doing 3 years ago?
No.
No, it moves, it changes. So it's really important that we keep these math models and forecasts and things like that, because that also gives you a record. I can go back to my spreadsheets from 2015 and I can see what I did and what happened. Math is telling me a story of how I ran my business. Okay, so we're going to understand how to monitor it before we get through this presentation. We do have a life preserver. Anybody? I mean, I know we're not happy with the information I'm sharing, but everybody get comfortable so far. All right, so let's bust another myth. Is 50%, if you make 2 times your money on an ad, are you doing okay? How many of you have been in a group and you've heard if you're making double your money, you're fine? I'm sorry, you're not. You're gonna work for free for 4 months, and we're gonna talk about that. So this is, again, a math model. This is a hypothetical model, but models are how we learn about our business. And it's literally just putting some numbers in some boxes. You guys can all do this when you get home, I promise. You're qualified. So let's imagine this author who spends $1,000 to make $2,000 on their book. Did Amazon or anybody give them any money at the end of that month? No. So they walked away with a negative $1,000 on their credit card bill. Maybe they used cash, in which case I'm very proud of them, but in most cases they're using a credit card. Month 2, we're going to do it again, right? It worked last month, so we're going to spend another $1,000 to make nothing, because Amazon still just owes us $2,000. Now Amazon owes us $4,000, but we don't get it yet. And here's the kicker that people forget to calculate. Let's move into month 3. We still have to spend that $1,000 again before Amazon pays us our royalties at the end of the month. So now, on like the 27th, my credit card bill is going to have that negative $3,000, and Amazon's going to pay me what from month 1? What number? $2,000. And when that's your first month making 4 figures, I guarantee you spent that money 6 different ways before it ever hit your bank. You have decided you're going to celebrate, you're going to pay off that bill, the hot water heater breaks, so you're going to pay for that. It's 90 days from when you start making sales until it actually hits your bank account. But we all talk about 60 days, but in practicality it's about 90. So, but let's pretend that this author has a full-time job and everything, and so they're going to put every penny of their royalties back to pay off their marketing bill. So they have a $3,000 cost on their credit card bill at the end of month 3. They get $2,000. So how much do they still owe American Express? They still owe $1,000. Month 4, now you tell me anybody whose ads work the same by month 4 that they started in month 1. I'll wait. I know. So we're going to spend that $1,000 again. We're going to make $2,000. We get paid $2,000, and we can finally pay off the last of the credit card bill. Did anybody realize that if you make 2 times the amount of money you're spending in marketing, you're going to work for free for 4 months? I didn't. I didn't until I first started to do it and started to see it and everything. At the worst time in my business, I ended up having to pay off about $20,000 in credit card bills. because I followed a lot of advice that didn't work. And then I wrote more books to make more money as well, so. Yeah, so yes, if you would like to work 100% for free for 4 months, then, and everything's gonna stay the same, then 2 times the money is a good jump. But it's not. Nobody, who wants to work for free? Nobody. Now, let's be honest. Oh, and really fast, because I put this on here. If you were looking at that and thinking to yourself, Elizabeth, it'll eventually work out, because after you get to that 0 point in your credit card bill, now it's all profitable, right? Because that 5th month, they're going to spend $1,000 to make $2,000. They're plus $1,000. Well, if you keep extrapolating that out for the rest of the year, 12 months of $1,000 in ad spend is $12,000. If we assume our author is making $2,000 in royalty, they're only going to get paid 10 months. Does that make sense to everybody? And that's $20,000. But in our heads, we thought that we were keeping double the money. In reality, you only had an $8,000 profit. Math is really kind of strange sometimes, but I like numbers. So that's a pre-tax profit margin of 40%. Not too bad, not too shabby, but it's on the lower end. So mentally, people think that they're going to double their money, but mathematically, it just doesn't happen. It's not an accident I did a slot machine or anything up there. Does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns, or anything like that? Good? Okay, I'm going to keep going. So here's what I usually hear or see what happens, and see if this resonates with what you've seen in author groups. Somebody spends $1,000 to make $2,000. The next month, they tell themselves, if I spend more, I'm going to make more. And they sometimes do, but is it usually at the same ratio of that first month? No, because there's limits in our marketplaces and we don't know it. There's limits in terms of the visibility, there's limits in the number of authors buying in any given month. A lot of people think that indie publishing was easier in the golden era. When I started, less than 100 sales a day would get you in the top 100 of the whole Kindle store. We honestly didn't have customers. So now there's a lot of room and opportunity for mid-listers. Your book can be ranked at 60,000 in the paid Kindle store, 200,000 in the paid Kindle store. You're still making sales. But when some of me and my friends started, that meant that you weren't selling anything. So month 2, they increased their spend. They spent $2,000. They made $3,000. They still haven't been paid anything, and now they have $5,000 on their credit card. That's code. And then month 3, they're like, well, maybe if I just increase a little bit more, I can get to $3,500 maybe. And then they get their royalties and they spend down their credit card, but they're starting to realize that this is a sinking ship. At this point, usually if you have a partner or a spouse, you're starting to hear some grumblings and things like that of like, well, what are you really doing? I'm not seeing any money or any kind of return. And then by month 4, they don't cut their ads because then they feel like they'll lose all of the traction that they've had for 3 months. So they just cut it down to the very minimum. And they still end up walking away with about $2,000 on their credit card. Have you guys seen these kinds of situations with your friends in author groups? Yeah, and nobody talks about it. Everybody talks about that one person who you heard maxed out their credit cards and made it big, and they were a New York Times bestseller and a USA Today bestseller, and their books are in all the bookstores. Nobody talks about the thousands of people who tried that and it didn't work. So this is just a little bit of the story for that on that slide that I just talked about. And a lot of times, and this is no shade on anybody who teaches marketing classes or anything like that, I'm friends with a lot of them, but usually what they share and everything like that, people sometimes walk away with a misconception that they can just spend their way to profitability. If there was a way to magically spend X dollars to be profitable in this business, none of us would be here because the big publishers would all be doing it. Any questions? Okay, I'm just checking the time. Oh my goodness. But I don't want you to despair, because as depressing as all of that was, I want you to pat yourself on the back, because you guys just got through 2 math models, and then we also did a metric analysis about what does 60% pre-tax profit margin mean. So a metric measures, and then models are how we understand the business world around us. It's just plunking numbers into boxes and starting to see how the patterns go out. How many of you use spreadsheets, use charts and things like that to understand your data better? Oh, I love all of you. That's why you're up at 8:15 in the morning. All right, so when you leave this seminar, my goal for you is that you can look at your own advertising spending and how are your expenses in relationship to your overall revenue. How many of you are comfortable with understanding how much you spend versus how much you make? Okay, you guys probably didn't need to come to my class, but I'm glad you're here. So here's the good news. This is one of the best books that I've read about business. It's called Profit First. Have you ever wondered what percentage of your revenue should be your expenses? I did. I got lucky. I was basically like a blind squirrel who found an acorn. When I read this book, and then I did some of the exercises in it, I realized that I was pretty much on par with what he was recommending. So I was lucky. So we're going to see how expenses can run your business into the negative in a blink of an eye, but also you can't starve your business with expenses because it's just like a fire. You know, you have oxygen and fuel. If you think about the expenses like oxygen, you take that away, what happens to the fire? It goes out. All right, so profit first ratios. Please do read the book, but here is the too long did not read. Pay yourself profit first. What he recommends is 5%. And he does actually recommend that you have different bank accounts. I do. I have 4 different bank accounts with my business bank account so that as revenue comes in, it immediately gets shuffled to the different accounts by the percentages. The 5% is what you use to reward yourself quarterly for being a business owner, because you're awesome. If you owe debt, you put 4% towards your debt payments and you keep 1%. We're humans, we really like positive things. So you want to make sure that you're celebrating quarterly the fact that you're still in this business. I've lost a lot of friends over the decade with publishing. They're just not here anymore. So please do celebrate every time that you're still in business as an author. Next, expenses should be about 30%. Personally, I don't spend more than 1/3 of that on my advertising. I'll talk about that again, 10% towards advertising. Why 10%? Because I need the other 20% to come to Vegas. Also to pay for my editing. I do my own book covers and things like that, but I do have other expenses for like Adobe, when I need a new computer. I had an office space for a little while, so you want to give yourself room. You don't want to spend all 30% on ads, because don't we have other expenses than just ads? Yeah. Finally, in the US, in most cases, you're going to set aside 15% for taxes if you make less than $250,000. Now, all of you are going, wait a minute, hold on, Elizabeth. I know that self-employment taxes in the United States is like 15.89%. It's okay, because you're only going to pay taxes on the profit, which means your expenses should be tax deductible. So you're not paying taxes on the full 100% of revenue. You're only paying taxes on the 70%, the 100% minus 30%. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. And then guess what your salary is? 50%. Every dollar you make, 50 cents of it should go in your pocket towards your personal things that you want. Any questions? Has anybody been following these kinds of ratios, or are these ratios illuminating? You're going to go back and look at your business and see where you fall? Yes, question?
I just want to comment, so I've been publishing since 2017, and in 2019 I thought I had a really good year. My husband comes to me and says, hey honey, I'm really excited. You made $3,000 last year. And I just burst into tears. I was like, oh my God, we have a serious problem here. So pay attention to what you're spending.
Yes.
Seriously.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
That was very brave. You know, clap for her. It's really hard. It really is hard. What she shared, for those who don't have the audio, is that in 2017 she thought she was doing really well. In 2019 she realized after her husband looked at the books, the accounting of it, that it was $3,000 in a year, but you had a lot higher revenue, huh?
Lot higher.
Lot higher
And I was
revenue.
spending way too much money on ads.
She was spending way too much money on ads. It happens. It happens in the blink of an eye. It really, really does. Okay? So let's look at what that actually looks like for authors at different levels, okay? Because I love this part of the presentation. Okay, we still have 20 minutes. So let's look at that $200,000 author that we met earlier. This person is going to have $10,000 every year to celebrate that they're an author. Does that sound like a pretty good budget to celebrate? I mean, I want 10K to celebrate with. That's great. Their expenses are going to be about $60,000. Now, if you're a little over, a little under, you can make a little bit of adjustments. So if you're 33% expenses, I still think that you're killing it. And then your salary might go down to 47%. So they're going to have to pay about $30,000 in taxes, depending on how they deduct and how they do their taxes. That's for their accountant. I'm not an accountant, so the important thing is to have that money saved. How many of you have been shocked with a tax bill? Yeah, so it's really important you throw that money into an account. I like to put mine into a Schwab account just because it takes 3 days for me to get it back. That way I don't spend it. And then the salary, that's actually a six-figure author. $100,000 in the pocket. I meet people all the time who are like, I'm a six-figure author. I'm dying to say, how's your profitability on that? But most of them won't tell me. That's $60,000 a year author. That's my wheelhouse. That's the area I hang out. I know you guys are thinking like, no, Elizabeth, you said you averaged $20,000 a year in profit. It's been higher some years, it's been lower some years. That was an average. But for the most part, I'm usually anywhere between $25,000 and $40,000 that I keep as my salary. And this is someone that you can see the expenses and saved to pay taxes and everything like that, and walked away with $30,000. $30,000 for a part-time job that doesn't necessarily require hands. A lot of times when you are that author, and correct me if I'm wrong, we all work, those of you who don't have another job and you're doing this full-time, did you learn that your time also has a value for the things that you can do because you don't have a 9 to 5? Yeah, exactly. I'm able to save so much money at the grocery store just by not shopping exhausted and hungry. That $15,000 a year author, okay, that's still an amazing author as well because that person's walking away, if they're using Profit First, with $7,000 a year. We just heard a story about how somebody only walked away with $3,000 a year. So $7,000, believe it or not. So Amazon, excuse me, did a shareholder report a few years ago. And you can still see these on their website. And they said that we have over 1,000 authors who make six figures. Now, shareholder reports, if you don't know, are always sunshiny, the best case scenario we can talk about to our shareholders. If they had more than 2,000 authors, they would have put 2,000 in that thing. So it's pretty safe to say they had, at the time, I think it was 2018 or 2017, they had between about 1,000 authors and 2,000 authors making six figures. Then they had another stat in there. They said that we have over, I believe it was 10,000 authors who made at least $25,000 a year in our KVP program, in the shareholder, see, I see the face, the shareholder report. Now let's think about that. How many authors do we think are in the Amazon? I mean, we have 2,000 authors here today. Do you guys think that maybe there's 50,000 authors in the Amazon store? Higher? Do you want? Oh, yeah, Kevin's showing higher. Okay. Well, we'll be conservative. We'll say 50,000 authors. So if only about 10,000 of them are making $25,000 a year, and that's gross, that means that the 80% of the authors are not, because 10,000 is 20% of 50,000. If you're talking about there's 100,000 authors, it's only 10% of the authors are making more than 25,000. And do the 1,000 authors, you start doing that and you're starting to get into single digits. So if you are here making any kind of money from your books, profit-wise, you are in the top tier of authors. You are elite. And I want you guys to understand that. Even if you make $1 profit off of your books, you're doing better than probably 80 to 90% of the author world in the KV. Yeah, woohoo! So that author who makes $5,000 is still taking home $2,500 a year in profit, not including the $250 they get to celebrate. And that's more than $200 a month on their monthly budget for their families. So the next slide I had just talks about that. At $200,000 a year, if you're keeping $100,000 of salary, you're looking at about $8,000 a month for your budget from your salary. And that, in most places, that person's a full-time pay breadwinner. They can live anywhere. Maybe not San Francisco, but other places that have, an okay cost of living, that person's full-time. $60,000, that's livable for one person. I do it with one person and my daughter. I do have another source of income as well. When I got divorced, I took 40% of my ex-husband's military retirement. I was married for 15 years. He got to keep the girlfriend. So I do make a living wage. I do make a living wage with the $30,000 a year. And that $15,000, I mean, How many of you know families that an extra $625 a month in their monthly budget would make a big difference right now? So I don't want anyone to feel any shame, whatever level you're at. If you're at those lower levels, you're still doing awesome. And finally, like I say, that $5,000 a year author, I guarantee you that author who's at the conferences think that they're small and think that they don't have anything to share or anything. But that's someone who's paying a bill from stuff that they made up in their head. So that's really impressive. Okay, so how do we do this? How do we actually stay profitable? Well, I talk about 4 different things. Number 1, we're going to make a forecast. I told you, eawestwriting.blogspot.com. I made a budget and I stuck with it. I was selling my book for $2.99. I knew exactly how many units I had to sell to make back that $414. My goal was to make it back within 12 months. I actually made it back in less than 6. I knew exactly how many sales I needed. Next, track your data. Spreadsheets or a tool like ScribeCount. I do use ScribeCount. I'm also the director of marketing for them. Or another accounting tool. That way you're going to add everything up, subtract the cost, and make sure you're on track. I do run the Facebook group, What Authors Need to Know, on Facebook, and in the new year, we're going to go back. Happy New Year's, Mean Girls, the movie. We wear pink on Wednesdays. We do our accounting on Fridays. So I was doing the best with my business when I was checking in every single week. Evaluate regularly. So we're going to have those meetings monthly, quarterly, at a minimum. You're going to cut the expenses that are not impacting revenue. Identify what's making you more revenue. It's usually writing another book. That's the number 1 way to make more money. And then you just decide to do more of that. And then finally find joy, because miserable people, they make really bad decisions in business. And publishing is a solo sport. So use data to tell yourself a story and adjust if that story doesn't match your values. And we're going to go through each one of these. So a forecast can be as simple or as complicated as you want. This is a very simple forecast. This is someone who's like, okay, I'm going to have some backlist books. I'm going to expect them to do 5 books, making $500 a year, or $41 per month. How many of you can imagine like hustling on social media to try to make sure each one of your books makes at least $40 in a month? That's sharing tweets, that's putting it on Facebook, that's doing newsletter swaps, that's organic marketing. It's usually within the realm for most of our reaches. Then frontlist, I'm going to have 3 books. I'm going to shoot for 400 sales and at a $2.70 royalty, and that's $3,200. When they added those together, they're a little high on the monthly expenses, but this way, their forecast, they have a pre-tax profit. And they're going to walk away with hopefully a 58% pre-tax profit margin. This is a forecast. How often is the weatherman right?
Nope.
No. I like to tell my students, this is just a flag. You're just going to put a flag. If you like Eddie Izzard, that's kind of where I got it. You're just going to put a flag. Now, having that flag doesn't mean that you're just going to hit that spot. You might go past it, you might go behind it, but I guarantee you, if you don't have anything to shoot for, you're just going to end up wherever you end up. You're not going to have anything to go for. Now I'm going to show you mine. I combine my forecasting with a profit and loss statement all in one spreadsheet. If you can't see this, their slides are on Eventing, you can zoom in. But the big thing is, I have my production month on the left, and then I have my paid month on the right. So if you look at column A, it says November of 2022. And I'm going to be writing Mom Number 6 is Moralities of Marriage, Book 6. I just abbreviated. And I'm hoping this month to have $800 in revenue, and I get paid that January of 2023. Now you'll notice there's some empty boxes. That's where I put what actually happened. So I'll do my actual revenue, my actual expenses. If you go down to the bottom there, you'll notice September of 2023, I'm going to be working on a witch novel, I hope. I'm expecting $5,000 in revenue. And you see all the way to the right, what do I have in the notes? Vegas. So I have to make sure that I have my expenses and everything like that to make sure I'm doing okay. And if you look at that very right column, you'll see the profit and loss. And all that means is, how's the cash flow going? You'll see some months that are negative. That's okay, because I keep money in my business savings account. So all that money keeps going over. Does anybody have any questions about this one? Okay. Does anyone do this? Production month and when you get paid?
Personal.
Good. Huh?
Personal.
How many of you are going to start doing this? Production month and when I and when I get paid. Now, cool thing about forecasts. Mine changes all the time. So at the end of the year, my spreadsheet usually has about 6 or 7 tabs. So I don't ever delete something that I did before, because sometimes I have to go back to that planning. But what I'll do is I just copy it and make it another tab. So here I'm imagining, and I'm really hoping it does not happen. Here I'm imagining, what if I get sick in January? Well, with a spreadsheet, you just copy and paste and move it on down. And that's basically what I've done on this spreadsheet. That's the big difference between that one and that one. How many of you change your production schedule throughout the year or update it? All the time, yeah, okay. So good, I'm glad for that. You can also use tools like ScribeCount. So ScribeCount will always show everything that, it'll show all of your different platforms with a click of a button. We also have an ad tracker, so you can see in real time how much you're spending on ads on Facebook and Amazon. Facebook and Amazon, and what your royalties were for that day. So it will show you a little graph on our ad tracker of what your profitability is as you're going through it. How many of you use ScribeCount? Oh, cool. ScribeCount also, you can put expenses against a specific book in a specific month. We're hoping to increase this improve this reporting in the next year. We're going to have more calculators, and we're going to have more nuanced accounting. We have some people who use it, who are accountants, who are going to consult with us and stuff like that to make sure it's even more robust. All right, evaluating, because I have 9 minutes left. How many of you heard the phrase garbage in, garbage out? Yep. How many of you understood what it meant? Okay. I'm still going to go over it, so I'm sorry you're going to have to sit through that. But when we start measuring things, when we look at metrics, when we build metrics for our business, we have to be a human about it. We have to take into consideration, for example, my read-through. If book 1 has been free, am I going to get an accurate read-through if I compare book 1 and book 2? No, because book 1 was free. So I'm going to look like I'm a sucky author because like only 25% of the people who have had book 1, I mean that's actually high, maybe 5%, who had book 1 get book 2. So I have to be a human and realize that my better metric is book 2 to book 3 or even book 3 to book 4. So if you are putting garbage information in, guess what kind of result you're going to get? You're going to get garbage right back out. I also want you to define success before you make a metric. I want you to know what your win con is, your win condition. So for example, let's say how many of you make a daily word count goal? How many of you hit it? I don't. I'm not. Yeah, okay, we've got some of these. Okay. Now, so sometimes I have to think about what am I going for? And this is really in Becca Sign's wheelhouse. If you do any kind of work with Becca Sign, she has QTP, that's where a lot of this kind of comes from. Am I looking to be consistent or am I trying to make a deadline? And if I'm trying to make a deadline, does it matter if my word counts are consistent, or does it matter that I hit the deadline? So maybe if I'm trying to hit a deadline, I just need to look at my word count on the weekly basis or on the monthly basis, depending on how far the deadline is out. Does that make sense? Okay. So you might find that some metrics aren't helpful, and then that's great because you don't have to use them anymore. Cutting expenses. You cannot cut expenses usually to profitability. The only way to profitability is making more revenue. You can cut some expenses, don't get me wrong. I mean, if you're using solid gold office supplies and you're a 4-figure author, that might not be a good match. But each month I ask myself if I use the tool that I'm paying for. If I did it, it goes on the bubble. And if the next month I'm still not using it, guess what I do? Cancel it. Yeah. I don't do any yearly subscriptions if I can avoid it. I know they say that you save money with it. Usually it's about 15 to 20%. But I save money if I don't use it after month 3 of not paying for 9 more months. Also, how many of you have a 1-day meeting with yourself once a month or once a quarter? Yep. It's a little bit mad. It's like you're talking to yourself. But if you do have like a time crunch, try a half-day meeting with yourself, maybe every 2 weeks. And that's the moment that you're going to sit down and you're going to evaluate what you've been doing in your writing business. I suggest you do OREO, which is praise, correct, praise. So you're going to find something good that you're doing, find something that you can do better on, and then finish it up with something that you're doing good on so that you still want to write come Monday morning. So, for example, I really stink at writing down the word counts. Oh, you can also use tools, too, to automatically collect it for you. How many of you play For the Words? Yeah, it'll automatically keep your word count per day, so I don't have to write that down. And sometimes I cry when I see the weeks that I skipped. I use a lot of stempos. Any question on metrics? Okay. This is the last slide, and I want to thank all of you for being here. So madness is doing the same thing and expecting a different result, making money off of stuff that was just in my head, loving what I do so much. Literally half of my life is tax deductible, and this is an absolute insane one. I'm just going to ignore my money and just hope it all works out in the end. I've been guilty of that one in the past too. Unfortunately, I'm lucky that I didn't do it for so long that I ran myself out of business, but if you just ignore it and think that it's going to just magically work out, I'm probably not going to see you here next year, and I'll be sad. So please, please watch your money. The last thing I'll leave you is one of my favorite quotes from Alice in Wonderland, and she says, "But I don't want to go among mad people," Alice remarked. "Oh, you can't help that," said the cat. "We're all mad here. I'm mad, you're mad." So, additional resources last is Facebook group, What Authors Need to Know. There's a YouTube channel. He's an Australian creator, and I love him. S. Struthless. He does a lot of great stuff about creativity and mindset and how to. He's an animator. It's just good stuff. Just check it out. How You Work Best, literally anything with Becca Syme. That helped me a lot to realize that I do things differently than other authors. And I really appreciate her being in the industry. If you need to learn something, I'm really big on DIY. I look at my local college and find out what textbook they're using for a class that I need, and I just get the textbook and read it. So if any of you have taken any college, you'll know that if you just read the textbook, usually that's enough. And then finally, writer@elizabethanwest.com. Please, you can email me if you want to do a private Zoom and we can talk about your numbers. I'm always available for anybody who needs it. And that's it. Thank you for coming to math at 8 o'clock in the morning. We have 4 minutes, so if anybody has any questions or anything, we do have time for that. No? I broke everybody's brain? Nope, you have a question. Love your hair, by the way.
Thank you.
And polka dots. Go ahead.
So forgive the newbie questions,
No.
since everyone here is an expert.
Not at all. We love
So, anyone listening who only has one book out and isn't making any profit yet, because you're still working out details, what advice would you give us for just spending our money that we make from jobs, etc., until we hit a point where we can use these kind of systems in an accurate way?
You can actually use these systems now because you're going to forecast. Remember, my first book, I had a plan for that first year, and I know, and I was going to sell like 2 copies a month or something like that. I looked at myself as being like an intern. I really didn't. There wasn't as many resources as there are now. Honestly, you guys are a little bit inundated, I think, with education sometimes. It's like a fire hose. So I think that checking in with yourself every 2 weeks is a good technique. So you're going to make sure that you're going to move that needle, and you're going to have to get a friend or an accountability partner. You can email me, and I will help you. That you're just going to move that needle a little bit. And I promise you, when you look back 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, you're going to start to see a difference. So I would use organic marketing more so than anything else my first year. Another question?
So when you are building your expenses accounts or using profit first, do you limit your spending to what's actually in your expenses account, or?
Yes. So show it. I literally have like one debit card for the expenses. I have a different debit card for salary. I have a different, I have multiple debit cards because each account has a debit card associated with it. So my expenses get spent out of my expense account. My bills get paid out of my, actually my salary account and my bills account are 2 totally different things, because you have to, when you read the book, you'll find out that you have to keep money in your salary account as well. Did you have another question? Oh.
I just want to make a comment that that book can apply to your personal finances too.
Yes.
It's the reason I'm here.
Oh, yay, we're going to hear that. I think, are we
About a
done?
minute.
We have 1 minute, 41 seconds.
Do you have all your debit cards in an RFID safe wallet?
I'm sorry?
Do you have all your debit cards in an RFID safe wallet?
No, but that'd probably be a good idea. I do not have an RFID thing. I want to answer your earlier question. The other thing is, I built a website and I talked about this yesterday. I blog my chapters. So that was my #1 marketing way, and it still is. When I don't blog my chapters, I make less than 50% on my books than when I give it away for free. I know that's so mad, it's crazy. But reading a chapter is akin to the experience of being in a bookstore, and you can pick up that book and look at it. And usually by the 4th chapter, they've made a decision and they just click the buy button. So after the presentation, if you want to talk at all about where you are in your journey, I'm happy to. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
So I've been in a couple of presentations this year where the speaker has said, don't do any advertising until you have 3 books. because it's not going to pay for itself, and it will be a money suck. I was surprised to hear that from multiple speakers.
So I think that they're saying that to try to protect people from spending money. I would say it depends on what you're going for. Like they say, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Okay, I did a book club feature ad when I only had one book, but I didn't know any better. But here's the other thing. Those people became my customer in the different vendors. So when I released another book 3 years ago, some of them got notified. So if you're spending that money with a full understanding of how long it's going to take you to make that back, that's really what they're trying to say. And they're just simplifying it to don't spend any money until you have more than one book. Is it easier to recover that money when you have more than one book? Absolutely. But if you only have one book, you can also find that advice sometimes doesn't work for like nonfiction. Sometimes they only write one book and their main bread and butter is actually selling classwork and things like that. So I would say it really depends on your unique situation, but I would say smartly spend your advertising money and have a plan for earning it back. Does that help better? So it's not really an end. Okay. Thank you all so much. I'll be in the main area, and thanks for coming.